Do I believe we went to the moon? No. And you ought to sue your brain for non-support if you do believe we went to the moon. Nobody ever went to the moon. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
This is Greg Locke. He's a megachurch pastor, televangelist, just all around not a fantastic person. Apparently spreading the conspiracy theory that we've never been to the moon. Now, what I find really interesting about some of these pastors is you can tell who they listen to or what shows they watch and things like that based on the conspiracies they espouse in any given moment, right? Like Greg Locke talking about the moon and never having walked on it right now perfectly lines up with Candace Owens going on Bill Maher's, podcast or whatever it is that he does, and talking about the fact that she thinks we never landed on the moon. Perfectly lines up with it. So I wanted to listen to what Greg said about it, and then I want to listen to what Candace Owens had to say about it. If you're unfamiliar with Candace Owens, she's just a far-right extremist. She agreed with Kanye West when he went on his media tour talking about how evil Jews are and all this other stuff. It's insane, dude. Insane. She also works for Ben Shapiro, of all people, on the Daily Wire. Seriously. Anyway, yeah, let's give this a listen. Let's see what old Greg Locke here has to say about the moon landing being fake, and then we'll listen to Candace Owens' remarks on the subject. This is late October 2023 when Locke's video came out, mid-October 2023 when Candace Owens' video came out. So check out Locke, late October 2023.
Of course we've been lied to by the government. Okay, I get that. Of course you can fake pictures. I get that. Do I believe we went to the moon? No. And you ought to sue your brain for non-support if you do believe we went to the moon. Nobody.
It just, we're going to get into the science of it a little bit more in a second, but it blows me away that there's such overwhelming evidence against what he's claiming right now. And he claims it anyways. Not only that, not only did he espouse the idea that the moon landing was faked, but apparently he's hosting or hosted a debate with another pastor in the area about the earth being flat. Surprisingly, this blew me away when I found out, Greg Locke seems to be on the side of the earth is not flat. I mean, all of these conspiracy theories somehow go hand in hand with each other. Why is it that every time I find somebody that accepts one of these conspiracies, they're almost guaranteed to accept all of them? And we keep listening here.
Support if you do believe we went to the moon. Nobody ever went to the moon. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. 50 years and we ain't been back, got more technology.
We have been back. Are you kidding me? 50 years we haven't been back. Yes, we have. We went back to the moon like 12 times. We'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, how many times we went back and who went back and everything.
Years and we ain't been back, got more technology in your hand that they had to send a rocket up 50 years ago.
Well, I mean, yeah, we do have a lot of technology in our hand. There was a big boom in the 90s, 2000s, in the 80s, honestly, too. That doesn't mean we were incapable of doing that. Like what? Quick interjection. I won't take long. I just wanted to tell you guys, YouTube's algorithm operates off of a few factors. Watch time, whether or not you subscribe, and whether or not you like something. So if you really want to help my channel, I would appreciate it if you guys watch the video to the end. If you don't watch it to the end, just watch a little bit longer than you would have otherwise. I would appreciate that very much. All right, let's get back to the video.
Of course, we've never been to the moon, okay? Hemant and all these Twitter people.
Talk about Hemant Mehta.
We've never been to the moon, so go ahead and clip it and get me a Newsweek this week, whatever. Shut up.
I just think it's ridiculous. That's all. I just think it's a ridiculous thing to believe. You know what? I played this a minute ago. I'm going to just keep this on tap just in case I need it again.
I'm dumber than a box of rocks in a lot of areas. Facebook just makes people think I'm smart.
Thank you so much, Greg. I really appreciate your contribution to the conversation. So anyways, Greg Locke apparently listens to Candace Owens. I believe that he does. There are other examples of this where various different hate preachers, I love to know who they're listening to that brought them to these conclusions. I have other examples of hate preachers espousing things that are very obviously from very specific people, right? Like Steven Anderson of the NIFB, hate preacher, extremist, talks about hating gay people all the time.
after 5 years as a so-called Christian.
That guy, yeah. He went on this whole rant about Alex Jones hosting Kanye on his, on InfoWars or whatever, and talked about how Kanye doesn't know what he's talking about, even though Kanye and Steven Anderson are both anti-Semitic nutcases, even though, like, Alex Jones is seemingly an anti-Semitic nutcase. Like, they're all in agreement with each other, and somehow they found these weird little disagreements to have. Anyway, the point is, I love finding out where preachers get their information from. With Steven Anderson, it's InfoWars. It's Alex Jones, With Greg Locke, it seems to be Candace Owens and The Daily Wire. So check this out. October 22nd, 2023, Bill Maher, who was once ostensibly on the left, but really isn't on the left at all anymore. He's on the right. In fact, he's kind of drifting toward the far right at this point. Bill Maher gets Candace Owens on his podcast to talk, and here's how the conversation went. Spoiler alert, not well.
Don't you not believe, like, in the moon landing? So I'm supposed to believe you about climate?
I think it's so funny how people take, well, first off, I know what I'm talking about with the climate stuff, so.
No, she doesn't.
I'm just going to go ahead and promote.
Well, you're not the only one.
Yeah, well, I mean.
Don't even give her that. Don't even say you're not the only one. No, you don't know what you're talking about. I mean, I guess it's an okay debate strategy on Bill Maher's part because it keeps her guard down, and it still affirms the point that she is not the only expert in the field. Even in her head, she shouldn't consider herself the only expert.
You're not the only one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you should probably realize, that there is, in the same way that there are narratives I think you're now more awake to. The climate hoax is one that funds trillions of dollars, and we are not running out of space. You could fit the entire world if you stacked it like New York City in Dallas. So
okay, first of all, we're not talking about how many people can fit in how small of a space. You could fit those people in a space as big as Dallas, probably, I'm assuming. I mean, I don't even know if that's true, but let's just take that as an argument, or for the sake of argument, let's accept the premise. You can fit everybody in the world into Dallas if it was packed in like New York City. Each person needs a minimum of 10 acres, I believe, to feed them. I don't remember exactly what the number is, so don't quote me on that. To feed them, they need an amount of space to farm land and grow food and, raise pigs and chickens and cows and whatever. Or you get the occasional vegan, you got to grow the various, tofu and kale and things like that. So it's not just how densely you can pack people into a tiny little area. You have to feed these people too. Actually, out of curiosity, how much space does the average person use food grow? Okay, I don't know if this is true or not, but it appears, I'll see if I can look this up after the fact, and I'll add it in edits afterward if I can find the answer to this. In How to Grow More Vegetables, John Jevons claims you can sustain one person on 4,000 square feet, with 60% of that space dedicated to interplanted grains and or beans and stuff. Legumes or beans. The rest of the space would be taken up by high-calorie root crops, 30%, and vegetables, 10%. That's with high soil fertility and in a climate with at least 6-month growing season, so you can get in 3 plantings in that space. Use some of his methods with good results. I've never tried to grow all my grains and legumes, blah, blah, blah. So 4,000 square feet. Okay, so I think that, 4,000 square feet is 1/10 of an acre. You need at least that much space per person to grow food and to move around and store their car and their goods and their whatever. You can't just pack people in densely like that. So she's already, creating this ridiculous scenario that would never happen and could never work.
The entire world if you stacked it like New York City in Dallas. So
fit. I just said it's
you
not
said
about.
Fit, but the point is that the hurricanes are down. The whole idea that
hurricanes are down. What? What is she talking about? This is Statista.com, and this appears to be a chart of how many major hurricanes there were, category 3, 4, or 5, over the years. So you can see from the 70s to the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, 2020, you can see that there is a rise in hurricanes, although it's largely remained static in this graph. See if I can find like a larger, longer graph with like a waveform attached to it here. Tropical/subtropical storms and hurricanes, 1878 to 2020. Very obvious steep jump here. 1878 to 2018. There's obviously a steep jump when you look at like the entirety of the graph. So, I mean, she's just like lying nonstop. That's what Candace Owens does. She's a propagandist.
World if you stacked it like New York City and Dallas. So
Fit. I just said it's
you
not
said
about.
fit, but the point is that the hurricanes are down. The whole idea that every time it rains, it's because something bad is happening.
Nobody says every time it rains it's because something bad's happening with the climate. That's weather, not climate. They're different. She must know that.
Every time it rains, it's because something bad is happening. Is like it's okay. What was your climate disaster growing up? Mine was global warming. They don't even say it anymore.
That's because we switched from global warming to climate change. They're the same thing. Because people like Candace Owens go outside and pick up a snowball and say, look, see, the earth isn't getting warmer, we have snow. So, climate change is actually a more accurate descriptor of what's happening anyway. She's going to be viewed as a Nazi at some point in history. 100 years down the line, people are going to look at her and say, she is the reason why, at least partially, the reason why we are in the situation we're in and why we nearly all died. I believe that's what's going to happen. We'll see. She's on the wrong side here. The wrong side of history. Anyway, global warming and climate change are the same thing. That's the point.
What was your climate disaster growing up? Mine was global warming. They don't even say it anymore.
They don't say global warming anymore?
No, they don't. No, they say climate change. They went from global
Maybe
cooling.
not in your bubble, but in the world they do.
No, they don't. They went from global cooling to global warming.
They never were in global. No one was ever talking about. It was one. That's such a stupid talking point that you keep repeating. It's a zombie lie.
Okay, Bill Maher sucks. He is terrible on trans issues, on a ton of different issues. He's moving further and further to the right now. But on this one thing, he's right, and I love it. He just shreds her for it.
Point that you keep repeating. It's a zombie lie. It was one article in one magazine in one day, 1 week in Newsweek or something. Nobody was talking about global cooling. Yes, we understand that the planet is always changing. That's a different story.
No, there was a whole.
Candace Owens knows that. She must know it. You can't convince me that she's an honest actor. You know, people ask me sometimes, do I think Jehovah's Witnesses governing body members are honest actors? Do I think they're real? Or do I think that they're just pretending? They're faking it. It's like an age-old question with every cult leader that I deal with. I have to face the question, were they doing this cynically, just using the people around them? Or were they true believers as well? I think almost in every single case, it's a mix. I think they're cynically using people around them and even lying on occasion to try to bring more people into the group. But I think they do believe it by and large anyways. They'll just stretch it a little bit to make it seem more credible. You know, like Heaven's Gate, the belief that there's a comet that's coming and there's a spaceship behind the comet and we all have to check out together to hitch a ride on this comet and blah, blah, blah. With Candace Owens, I think it's all cynicism with her. Her and Dave Rubin both. I don't think that they believe anything they say. I think they are all in for money and fame. That's it, and power. I am hard-pressed to believe that she buys any of the nonsense that she spreads, really.
Different story.
No, there was a whole climate alarmism via the IPCC for global cooling.
No, there wasn't.
Okay. There was.
There was not a global... I mean, what does that even mean exactly? There's a climate alarmism over global cooling? What does that mean exactly? There wasn't.
But do you believe people landed on the moon?
Well, let's just back that up.
Because if you don't, then I think that's
no.
I think that really sets a standard for this discussion.
Oh, I love it, dude. She spent the entire conversation trying desperately to avoid that subject. She didn't want to talk about it. But the answer ultimately is no, she doesn't think we landed on the moon, and she gets to it in a second.
People did land on the moon.
I don't know.
Okay, there we go.
I don't know.
I do know.
I just want to know why we didn't go back.
We did.
Did go back.
What, did we go back? What year?
To the moon?
We people on the moon?
Okay.
I'm asking
Now
a serious
who's ignorant?
question. What?
She's just like, there's nothing knocking around up there, is there? Or is there something knocking around up there and she's pretending to be an idiot? Which is it? It's so hard to know for sure. I think she's feigning ignorance. Honestly. I think she's fake.
Serious question. When did we go? When did we go
We
back to
first
people walking
landed-
on the moon? 69. Okay.
July 20th, 1969.
Yeah.
I was born on the 20th anniversary of the moon landing, interestingly enough. As you'll see in a second, Bill Maher doesn't actually know. So let's just find out. We'll find out together. When did we land on the moon? Who landed on the moon? Let's just see. Let's see what we can get here. List of missions to the moon. Okay, so we had a bunch of launches to the moon. And then we had, in every decade, basically, 1950s, 60s, 70s, 0 launches to the moon in the 80s. Then we had 7 in the 90s, 9 in the 2000s, the 2010s, the 2020s. We've had a bunch of launches to the moon. In fact, we've had 36 successful moon landings, it appears. So Buzz Aldrin was in the first trip to the moon, as was Neil Armstrong, obviously. And I think those were the 2 people who walked originally. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were the first of 12 human beings to walk on the moon total. Yep. Buzz Aldrin also famously punched a flat earther who called him a liar. Oh, that's fantastic. So Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, the first people, July 20th, 1969. And then there was one guy who was going to stay in, like a ship or whatever, that was going to orbit the moon while Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin collected samples and walked around and did whatever. He was going to stay in this ship. And for a split second, well, not even a second, I think it was like a few hours, right? He was behind the moon and completely and totally cut off from humanity. The most isolated human being ever to have lived for a second. When he went around to the other side, he had no radio communication with the others that were on the moon, no radio communication with Earth, nothing. Michael Collins stayed aboard the command module Columbia, serving as a communications link and photographing the lunar surface. So, wow, that sucks for him, right? You got a couple of people walking on the moon and you don't get that opportunity? That's heartbreaking. Came all that way. I guess somebody had to do it, huh? Here's a list of people who've landed on the moon. We got Neil Armstrong, Apollo 11. Buzz Aldrin, also Apollo 11. Then we had Apollo 12, Pete Conrad, Alan Bean. Apollo 14, Alan Shepard, Edgar Mitchell. Apollo 15, David Scott, James Irwin. 16, John Young, Charles Duke. 17, Gene Cernan and Harrison Schmitt. Apollo 11, the first successful landing on the moon, was July 20th, 1969. Then we had Apollo 12, which was November 19th to 20th, 1969. Apollo 14 was 1971. Apollo 15 was 1971. Apollo 16, 1972. Apollo 17, 1972. And yeah, so that was the end, Apollo 17. I'm not sure if we went back after that or not, but that seems to be the tentative list right now. So Candace Owens was asking a direct, specific question. How many people have landed on the moon? What were their names? And when did they land? There you go. We have the answers. It's not that hard to find. All she had to do is a simple Google search. But she does this type of thing. It's a strategy. She asks a factual question that is easily answered if you have information in front of you when she's in a debate, and hopes that the other person doesn't actually know the answer, because then she can make them look like they lost the debate if they didn't know the answer. The answer's out there. Just had to look it up.
We went back like 10 more times.
Who went back? Who walked on the moon?
America. You know,
No, but like, what were the astronauts' names? Educate me. Why are you?
remembers what the astronauts' names were.
It's a pretty big deal to walk on the moon.
The first guy, and then after that, yes.
Who else walked on it?
I
How
don't
many?
remember the name.
12. And we just went through the list. They're in there.
Like another dozen.
Okay.
He's actually correct. Pretty close. 12 total, including Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin.
Yeah.
Another dozen humans walked on the moon.
Yes, Americans, all Americans.
Okay, we don't remember that.
We kept going back. Apollo 13 was the one they made the movie about. That was the one they aborted, but that was after we had landed. Apollo 11, I think, was.
I'm not talking about space missions. I'm talking about actual people walking on
Yes,
the moon.
landing on the moon and walking on it. First of all, it is an impressive scientific feat. It's not out of the realm of like, how could that possibly happen?
I feel like the only way that you can come to the conclusion that the moon landing was fake is through a combination of things. A, distrusting the government to the bottom of your heart, and not just the government, distrusting literally any authority of any sort anywhere, not even just the US government, but the Russian government and the Chinese government and the Canadian government and everybody. And not just the governments, but like their space agencies. They all acknowledge that we landed there. Everybody. Like private companies and space agencies and governments across the world acknowledge it. So I guess that means, like, what, they're in on the plot to deceive you? People arrive at this conclusion through a mix of two things. A distrust of every authority figure on the face of the planet, and a propensity to believe ridiculous things. To think that, the Earth is flat or something. A willingness to accept absolutely absurd premises. That's how you end up where Candace Owens is, if this really is her position.
250,000 miles away. They had figured out enough to be able to do it, even with the computers that they had in 1969. Yes, it's risky, and we did lose people doing it. But we did do it. I mean, plainly. I mean, the idea that you could think that this was some sort of hoax, I'm sorry, but it colors everything else.
I'm just saying that, like, I'm just not.
Absolutely, 100%. It colors her entire worldview. It feels like this is Bill Maher being exposed to who she really is for a moment. Like, he agrees with Candace Owens on vaccine stuff, probably ivermectin, I'm guessing, I don't know, on trans issues and a whole bunch of other things. So he's like, they're side by side with this stuff. But then he listens to her talk about a different subject that he has more information on, that he knows better about. And he sees her for who she truly is, a grifter, a scam artist, completely full of it. Or, as Greg Locke would say,
I'm dumber than a box of rocks in a lot of areas.
It's got to be one of those things, right? He's finally having this revealed to him.
That, like, I'm just not, like, I feel like you're just trying to find this one. Like, I've never talked about this on my show. You're literally talking about one funny tweet
it's
thread.
Relevant.
It's really
it's
not that relevant.
that you won't say,
no,
absolutely people walked on the moon. It's relevant.
It is extremely relevant because it shows where her headspace is. And this should be a clue to Bill. Like, you are listening to somebody who believes in the moon landing hoax stuff and all kinds of other hoaxes. You think she accepts evolution? She, I'm very confident, believes in a young Earth. How is it that Bill Maher went from making a documentary about atheism called Religulous to sitting across from somebody like this and finding common ground and sharing ideas with her and saying, yeah, 100%, you're totally right about the vaccines and the whatevers. I don't even know. The trans kids and stuff. Get back in touch with reality, Bill, please.
The moon. It's relevant.
Not
to beat a dead horse, but if you think the moon landing is a hoax, it colors my view of what you think of the global warming being a hoax.
Okay.
So let's get on
but I never said the moon landing is a hoax.
Well, you said
I said
you
name one conspiracy theory.
So she's describing the tweet that she put up. The tweet said something like, describe a conspiracy theory that gets you every time you hear it. And she said, mine is the moon landing or whatever. So she did say that she thinks it's a hoax. And she just said a minute ago she doesn't believe that we visited the moon. Seriously? She's going to back off of it now. She doesn't want to talk about it, apparently. She realizes how absolutely absurd it is.
I never said the moon landing is a hoax.
Well, you
I
said
said
you did.
name one conspiracy theory
No,
that
no, I asked
almost,
you
that
point
almost
blank.
got you.
I
I said I
asked
don't
you-
know anything about. I don't know anything about. I can't
I
even
don't-
debate you. You're sitting here telling
but-
me that 12 men have gone to the moon since. I don't know anything about it, and so I keep a very.
okay.
I think if there's one thing that people will say about me is I don't come into conversations about things that I don't know. So I'm not going to.
You know, honestly, I think that she probably said that in the first place on Twitter simply to make people feel that she was on their wavelength, if those people are indeed conspiracy theorists. And suddenly she has a group of fervent donators, listeners, and believers like that. Once she kind of hints at it. And she just has to hint at it. She doesn't have to come out and say, I believe it was a hoax, and then make her whole channel about that. She just has to say, yeah, maybe it was. I don't know. Suddenly she has a massive crowd of people who will hang on her every word. I think it's all a grift with Candace Owens, honestly. I really do. I don't think that there's a genuine bone in her body. I think she's faking from beginning to end, and I think the same about Ben Shapiro, her boss, and I think the same of Dave Rubin. I think these people are, just my personal opinion, shameless scam artists looking for their next big hit. That's what I think of these people, honestly. I think Bill Maher's just a poor sucker who got pulled into a ridiculous conspiracy with the COVID stuff, vaccines in general. He's always hated vaccines. I don't think he's bad faith. I just think he's, what was it again?
I'm dumber than a box of rocks in a lot of areas.
That one. Anyway, let me know what you think about it in the comments. I think these people are ridiculous.